Winging it. Hello. Today is what day is it? It's
October 2nd.
Wednesday, October
Wednesday.
2nd, 2024, and you're listening to the Biased Media Company podcast. Today, we're going to be talking some recent Trump comments, as always, the debate between JD Vance and Tim Walz, and our special first ever deep dive into the policy issue of universal school lunches. Joining me today are my co-hosts, Emma McGaugh and Slade Wright. So,
Yeah.
let's get
So
into it.
we finally
Awesome.
got the civilized debate that everyone's been wanting, and I hate it.
I know, it was
hate
pretty
it.
boring. I really wanted to see a slugfest, I'm not gonna lie.
I was honestly expecting Walls to do better, and I was lightly disappointed at how I don't think he did poorly, but I wish he spoke more eloquently.
Right. I mean,
Yeah,
JD Vance being a Yale-educated lawyer, it was Yale, right? I'm not getting that one mixed up with anything else. All the
yeah,
Ivy
it was
Leagues are the
Yale.
same. I'm not surprised by the result of it. Tim Walz is a guy, that is probably better at the dinner table variety of political discussion, whereas
Yeah, he
JD
spent a
Vance
lot
is
of
a
time on
trained.
Reddit too.
Right. No, that was funny actually. JD Vance brought up that picture he saw of the hurricane in Helene, or the Hurricane Helene, right? I almost said
Yeah.
Helene. In North Carolina, and I was like, wait a second, I saw that same picture this morning on the front page of Reddit. I was like, JD, you dog. Can't believe we get our news from. Well, I don't get my news from Reddit. I like watching train wrecks, metaphorical ones anyway. Anyway, I don't need to justify myself. But yeah, no, he definitely spends way too much time on Reddit, which I feel like a sitting senator. You don't have a whole lot else to do. I mean, what is he doing? Legislating? Thank
No.
God he's not. But yeah, let's talk a bit about the debate, and also specifically, what I want to talk about is the rather interesting direction CBS decided to go with their opening question.
Yes.
Yeah, their opening question being, they set the stage with these natural disasters throughout the country, with Hurricane Helene, and then they talked about the tensions in the Middle East ramping up. And the first question was, would you support a preemptive attack by Israel on Iran? Governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, your turn to respond to this.
Minnesota.
Yeah, that's a lot to start it off with.
Right. I mean, first of all, just full on into the scaremongering. Iran's 2 weeks away from WMDs. I was like, didn't we? I may have been a little too young for this at the time, but I feel like this has happened before. I'm getting this feeling in my bones where I'm like, where have I heard this before? Are we doing a sequel? Are we doing it again?
They have weapons that can cause mass destruction.
My God, yeah, no, it's just I hate to see that. Okay, that bit pretty much told me that in no uncertain terms are we headed towards war in Iran, one way or another. It's just really, that's the hill we want to die on. Is that really it was kind of funny because I saw a bunch of videos on Twitter, when the attack was launched against Israel by Iran, and it was so bizarre seeing missile strikes in the Middle East, but the people talking were speaking English. That's what threw me, and I was like, I don't know, because there's really something to say about the stark contrast of Israel getting hit with missiles, and these guys could just go back to Brooklyn and Philadelphia and to their other homes and be fine. But the Palestinians, when they were getting struck by Israeli strikes, there was literally nowhere else for them to go. And I think that speaks volumes as to how we're going to look at this conflict retrospectively in history. if there is a history to tell.
Yeah,
That's going to be one of the defining characteristics.
I think I don't know, maybe we can get into this a little later. We might be straying a little bit further from the topic, but it seems to me like Kamala Harris is gonna have to break from Biden.
Right.
Yeah,
Somehow you gotta say something about like reevaluating US aid to Israel, or like, you know, we're gonna abide by international law, right? I don't know.
literally. I don't know. I hope to see a break from full unbridled support of Israel. I really hope, but I realistically I don't necessarily see that happening. If it happens, it would happen after she theoretically gets elected, but I don't really see that happening. I see the US government is just balls to the wall. Israel is our ally. We're going to support them no matter what. No matter what they do, it's okay. They have a right to defend themselves, even though they are violently attacking hordes of people.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. I kind of think that I mean, I've thought this for a long time, so maybe this is, why would they change now? But I mean, it's an electoral win for her. I think if she
Mm-hmm.
breaks, like, I think she's gonna gain voters from this. There's really high Arab populations in all the swing states that she needs to win.
Yeah.
And you just need to pull like enough people from that, and you're gonna win.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's so to her own political detriment not to. And I don't know. I'm holding out hope that a few weeks after the election, we're gonna see some change.
I hope
Right.
so.
No, that's what I'm hoping too. I feel like there isn't anybody around who wants to immediately jump into another war in the Middle East.
Yeah.
No,
We were
it's
just
so
in one for
unpopular.
like, 20 years. Right. And it's like, okay, listen, if Israel were attacked randomly unprovoked by the Iranians, like, sure, defending them, fine. Like, that's like, I can agree with that. I don't know if I would agree to it to the extent of, full-fledged armed conflict in Iran, but at the
Mm-hmm.
very least, I would like understand, some defense spending being nudged their way. But
Sure.
Israel did this themselves. They started
No,
this
they've been
conflict.
they've been
They've been
escalating at every turn.
Mm-hmm. That's what they do. That's what they've been doing. That's what they've shown they're gonna do. That's what they continue to do. And our government keeps pretending that that's not what they have been doing and that's not what they're gonna continue to do.
it's right. Yeah, no, exactly. They're just going to continue to do this, and they're going to continuing to just resort to violence and
Yeah. I just don't like the rhetoric being around Israel defending themselves as if they didn't start this, as if they're not escalating this. There's a
right.
lot of conversation and questions in these interviews, and all the answers tend to be Israel has a right to defend itself. I agree that every country, everyone has a right to defend themselves, but to what extent? When does it turn? I mean, we've seen it's not defending yourself anymore.
Right.
It's
It's not.
No,
attacking, trying to
it's
expand.
escalated conflict. I don't see how this
Yeah,
makes like, if I was Israeli, I don't think I'd like this. Like, I mean, I don't see how this keeps their population safe.
exactly.
I again, I still think that a big part of this is still, my beliefs around the origin, the genesis of this conflict, this current iteration of this conflict remain unchanged. I still think it's Netanyahu is a big reason as to why this escalation continues to happen, and until, Israel, the Israeli people do something about their government, it's going to continue and it's going to get worse. And I really think we should not be supporting. Look, I've gotten ever since I discovered that I was no longer able to be drafted a few hours ago. I've been very hawkish since then. I'm like, hell yeah, we have the world's biggest military ever seen. Like, let's do it. I still think Iran's a bad idea.
Maybe
I'm
Canada.
glad. I hope.
We
Yeah,
start there.
exactly. That's who we need to start going with. Is against the Canadians. See, you got me started. It's my deep cover trigger word. Like that's what I go straight to. That's when I remember my heritage, and I'm like, those Canadian bastards. We need to show them what's up. It was just Orange Shirt Day, Truth and Reconciliation Day.
Mhm.
I got exposed to a barrage of anti-indigenous rhetoric on Twitter from Canadian politicians
Mhm.
about, like, oh, where are the bodies and stuff like that, talking about, the corpses of children that were discovered in residential schools. And I've never more viciously and violently hated Canada than I did at that moment. And let me
Yeah.
tell you, that's not a that's I anybody that knows me knows I have a deep disdain from Canada or for Canada. Not a fan of it. I don't like its image that it has online. I feel like their PR people are great, but Canadians are the worst. And every day I am affirmed of that. Every waking moment, anytime I see anything from Canada, I'm affirmed of that belief that they're the worst. But you know, to get back to the topic at hand, I really do think that was a terrifying first question. I feel like
Mhm.
it is, it's hard. I mean, like, it's hard to, because I feel like I internally dismiss it if I go back to, like Chomsky's manufactured consent, in, the original Iraq Afghanistan conflicts in the
Yeah.
early 2000s. But it
I mean,
feels,
it
it's
rings true
giving.
though.
Right. No, exactly. It's giving manufactured consent.
Mhm.
Hmm.
It feels like the media is, because again, like when I saw the missiles go flying in Israel, I wasn't thinking, boy, we're about to have another war. I was like thinking, oh, this de-escalation needs to happen
Mhm.
now. But the US press immediately jumps to, we're going to do a sequel to the last World War and it's going to be
Yeah.
weird this time.
I mean, like you said earlier, it's fear mongering. It's people trying to get clicks on their articles. They don't actually care about the topics and the population. They're trying to get more views and more interest in their stories. So they're not interested in de-escalation topics. They're interested in fear mongering.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
also, shoveling money into our military industrial complexes, great for all those people.
That's
Mhm.
right. The machines demand blood. We've been at peacetime for too long. It's been a whole,
Exactly.
what, year that we haven't been at war. The machine, the old machines
It grows
demand blood.
hungry.
It grows hungry. Yeah, I feel like that's the only way to look at these conflicts, is sort of like the eldritch. It's just like, it's not, because it's inhumane to think, like, really at the end of the day, how many people have a vested interest in seeing a war begin,
Mhm.
because it's going to bring them an incredible amount of money. I think a war with Iran is going to be an absolute disaster for us, just
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
last two wars have been. It's I don't know. I'm fairly anti-war. That's kind of like always been. I have like a list of exceptions. That's one of those things where, like, I feel like
Yeah.
wars and conflict is a very nuanced thing
I
and requires, a degree of restraint, but also a degree of consideration of, the other uncomfortable facts of things. But Iraq and Afghanistan were inexcusable. Iran will be even more so.
Yeah, I think it's clearly in our best interest to de-escalate. I don't understand why the focus is, I mean, I do, but I don't. Like, individual people, I hope, would understand we don't want a war regardless. Like, we'd like to de-escalate if possible. We'd like to find a common ground and some kind of solution rather than jumping to war and, oh my god, they're going to build nuclear weapons, we have to destroy them. Like, finding some reason, some excuse to start a war, because that's what the US does very well. We like conflict even though we say we don't.
Yes,
I
we are the
think
greatest greatest exporters of weapons in the history of the world.
Yeah, we like to show our power, show how how good our military is, how amazing we are, how strong we are.
I
We
I
Go
also
ahead.
think there hasn't been an original idea since the 2000s, and we're just doing a reboot of
Mhm.
it's like, I mean, I know that's a joke, but like at the same time, it's like, really, Iran, like, you know, and it's I don't like, I've obviously, because I believe that Donald Trump needs to lose more than
Mhm.
anything else. I have been very I have let some of my internal criticisms of the Biden and the Harris administration slide, because I do believe that above all else, Donald Trump needs to lose, because it'll be
Yeah.
infinitely worse. If Biden drags us into a war in the Middle East, a war that, you know, I was giving yeah, I was criticizing the Trump admin for nearly getting into. Remember, what was it? Like, it was you know, remember early January, or January to
When he
March of like
assassinated
2020?
Soleimani.
Right, right. Right,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that was something
And
that I
pulled out of
was
the Iran deal.
right, exactly. And that was something that I was criticizing the Trump administration for doing. And Joe Biden goes around and does the same thing, because he's got such a I'm trying to not be crass, hard
You can be
on for
crass.
Israel. Right, right. It's too late. It's out there.
Yeah, well, and Emma, I think that people do recognize this is not in our interest. I mean,
Mhm.
it does not pull well. People have been against Joe Biden's policies in the Middle East the whole time he's been in office. His approval rating has never recovered. Like uh they haven't gone above like 35% since
Mhm.
we've been in Israel. So I don't know. So just looking at like how let's recenter this a bit around how these guys answered this, how JD Vance and Tim Walz answered this question.
Mhm.
Tim Walz had to go first, which again is, I think it's so funny in a bad way, but that this question was just like thrown onto this governor of Minnesota. It's like, hey, would you nuke Iran?
Hey,
Anyways,
sitcom dad from the 80s.
yeah.
How would you
And
like
so
to make them Nick?
he started this by talking about October 7th and the Hamas
Mhm.
terrorist attack. So I don't know, starting off not well for him, I think, in the general public. His main
I think
attack was to like transition into the prospect of Donald Trump being
right.
our president during this time, our chief mediator.
Mhm.
And he used, so I like the strategy of saying how dangerous Donald Trump is to be in office,
Mhm.
but he used the word fickle a few times, which I thought was kind of funny in a
Yeah.
not so funny way. Because like I mean, this goes beyond fickle, right? Like
Yeah, I mean, I understand what he
he
meant, but I think he could have chosen some better words.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, so JD Vance took the first half of his response to basically give his opening statement, which
Mhm.
wasn't offered
His
to
life
them.
story.
Yeah, which wasn't offered to JD Vance or Tim Walz or Kamala Harris and Trump when they debated,
Mhm.
which I think threw everybody involved off. I don't think that anybody was prepared to do that.
Mhm.
But I think it's a good strategy from JD Vance to, not answer this pretty much unanswerable question.
Yeah.
And ultimately, he said that the best way forward is to follow Israel, which is
Mhm.
just as much of like a warmonger statement as anything that can be said.
Yeah.
But I think that he cushioned it well with his introduction and spelling out how he, you know, came from a pretty poor family that was on government assistance, and that we need to stand up for our right for people's ability to get the American dream. Like he's doing the populist rhetoric, um, and then
One thing that
frames his response as siding with our allies.
Yeah, one thing that really gave me a bad taste in my mouth was this sentence he said, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys.
Yeah,
That like grossed me out.
Right, right.
Just the use of bad guys. I
that's
think
a
that's disgusting, and he clearly doesn't he either doesn't understand what's going on or he doesn't care about the people that are being harmed.
I think he understands. I think it's just
right,
simplifying this down to the good guys and the bad guys. The
Yeah.
warriors of light versus the children of darkness, right?
Mhm.
right.
That's a
That's
Netanyahu.
exactly. Yeah, no, that's it because it's the same playbook every time. Like we talk about how I mean, let's be honest. Like JD Vance knows absolutely what he's saying, and the tools he's got to just support this conflict, and that's what it was. Because like no, there aren't any certainly not among the undecided voters who think that America are the bad guys. Like you either
Mhm.
exist in like first of all like the dichotomy between good guys and bad guys is childish and
Yeah,
and
reductive,
reductive.
and
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a reductive.
and
However,
ignores any
even
any type of look at like how we got to this point.
right
Yeah.
nuance, context, all that goes out the window when you start saying good guy, bad guy, whatever.
And it's
But
sorry,
on the other
go
hand,
ahead,
the
Jay.
United States are like 100% bad guys. Like we have not been a great. No, we've not been a great country for the world is worse off for the policy decisions we have made for the last
Mhm.
since before we were even before our inception. And there's a sort of like there's a if because it's one of those complicated things where it's like you can recognize that and still feel like that there is a certain level of nuance and that labeling anybody the good guys or the bad guys is certainly a bad idea unless you're actively trying to target people who don't think critically about
Yes.
information that's presented to them. And once you understand that, you realize that's what JD Vance was going for because he was doing that the
Mhm.
whole night.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
also, I mean, John, before we started, you mentioned like the fascistic rhetoric, and like that's what this is.
Right,
Mhm.
And I
exactly.
think this
Although I will
dichotomy of like Tim Walz being, you know, doing attacks and making like points that are true, but kind of, but then kind of it boils down to like Trump being fickle
Mhm.
versus JD Vance decorating his language and saying something really fascistic, but it like doesn't sound that
Mhm.
bad. I think that was kind of indicative of how the debate went.
right,
And
right.
I don't know,
Although I
like,
will say that the final bit, the final question where you talked very specifically about January 6th is where you got sort of that
yes,
stronger rebuke of Donald Trump. And I believe that the Harris campaign has since cut that into an ad, which is great
yes.
because that is really like that's the big takeaway. I think I'm willing to chalk it up to Tim Walz just simply not being a natural debater. Like, and that's like,
Yeah,
okay,
and
debating is a relatively useless skill, especially for vice presidents. Listen, as
yeah.
somebody who like, who loves a good verbal tussle, um, it's a useless skill. Um, I feel like anybody that is undecided at this point, there's it's not really going to be the vice presidential debate is not going to be as big of an influencer on
Yeah.
individuals who are going to vote as
If
the
anything at
presidential
all,
debate.
Right.
My
because
key
historically it never
takeaways
has
from
been.
right historically it never has been exactly. My key takeaway from last night was that Walls because Walls has got you can kind of tell Walls has got a bit of a temper, right?
Mhm.
And you can tell that he was very restrained last night and that he was trying to show, he was trying to show two things, I think, and that was, his willingness to he's showing the voters that he's willing to play, second to Kamala Harris, like the fact that he's
Right.
willing to do that because this was Joe Biden's whole appeal as vice president too when he was running as the running mate for Barack Obama. It was, I will
Mhm.
willing to as a white man play second fiddle to a black man.
Mhm.
And it worked, and that's what we that's what they needed to get that over the finish line. And I think Walls is basically serving that same exact function there, except for rather than digging up an old neolib Delaware. They found one of the more progressive people in American politics today.
Right.
Despite the fact that, like, and this is kind of like the brand of progressivism that I personally believe is the key to convincing people to agree with progressive values, is the way that, because Walls doesn't have the language and, like, the terminology that, like, a lot of leftists love to use and sprinkle into their everyday
Yeah,
language.
he
You and I
speaks
are
to the
guilty of
everyman
that
very
too.
well.
Right, exactly. He's an everyman progressive, right? And that's sort of this, that I do believe very strongly that that's sort of the way that you're going to get progressive values across to the American public. Like, that is
Yeah.
the best
Yeah.
way, in my opinion, of doing it. And
I
Harry and
agree.
Walls did it very well, and it's one of his strengths, because it's clear that Harris is a very well educated, well spoken person. So you don't need two, you don't need two nerds on the ticket. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's kind of the role that Tim Walz plays, is he's the everyman to Kamala's policy wong. And because
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah, but I'd like to
inverse
see
of
him out there
Vance.
more.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
One of the
I
things I like that he did, especially on the climate change issue, he brings it back to the fact that he speaks to everyday people. Like, he's like, I've spoken to farmers. Climate change affects them because of droughts and flooding. It affects people
Yeah,
on an individual level. And he kind of brought it down to the average working person, the everyday person, rather than
yeah,
kind of the overall. I like that he made it a little more specific.
yeah. I did too. I
Right.
think that he definitely has some good moments, especially later in the debate, and I definitely think we can get that. We'll get to them, but I kind of want to tackle like the opening here real quick, just because like
Oh, I know, I
this is
know, I
what
know.
most
I'm
people are gonna
sorry.
see too.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so they had the opening questions about the they would do in the Middle East, and I think Tim Wall, I thought he was a little bit nervous too, especially in the beginning of the debate.
Yeah.
He stumbled over his words a few times. I think he was immediately on the back foot with that Iran question.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he got over that. I will say I hate to be saying these words, but I think JD Vance did his job well last night. I actually think that
Yeah.
he packaged his answers very well, and I mean that's reflected in a lot of polls too. I have a few
Mm-hmm.
of these pulled up here once I can find them. But both candidates' favorability has gone up since the debate, or both VPs, I should say, have gone up since the debate. I think Tim Walz has improved a little bit more than JD Vance's.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Vance is still in the negatives, right? Because I believe I saw that same
Yeah.
poll. Like, Vance is still
It was,
unfavorable.
yes, yes, he is. But I thought the way he packaged his answers was good. And honestly, I think we're gonna see a lot more of JD Vance in the month leading up to the
Mm-hmm.
election and less of Trump.
I
Because
agree.
between the two of them, like JD Vance came out as the better campaigner. Trump
Mm-hmm.
just like he can't stop shooting himself in the foot. I mean this whole
Yeah.
election cycle has been a disaster for him, and I think that
Mm-hmm.
his campaign knows it, and they've known it for a while. But especially with this debate, I think it probably convinced a lot of the higher ups in the campaign that JD Vance is really the way to go with speaking to people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was pretty honed in throughout the debate. He's definitely skilled at it, as we mentioned before, and I think it's going to be reflected in how they run the campaign. Trump canceled a 60 Minutes interview after the debate. Did you guys see that?
I did not. I think I heard like a
Yeah,
reference to it. It doesn't surprise me.
yeah. He's
I
supposed to go on
feel
60
like
Minutes
there's
in a week from now, I think, or sometime next week.
right. I feel like we've been watching his very rapid decline. Just,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
as like a personal aside, like, the one rally where he showed up and he was like almost like he was drunk.
Yeah.
It's just like he's like physically
He
not
looks
doing
ill.
great, and he looks ill. He looks tired. He's 80 million years old. He's a ball of hate. Like, it's
And
but to
his
go back to
rallies are smaller in size. And I think that
right,
comment from
right.
Kamala Harris really got to him.
It really did. It
Yeah.
really did. It broke his heart because because that's what happens when you confront a narcissist with reality, and
Mm-hmm.
it's so bad that they can't deny it. And that's
Yeah,
exactly what we saw in him.
there was a clip I think it was this week, maybe it was last week, I'm not sure if you guys saw it, but he was like, it was at his debates and people were getting up and he like pointed at them and he was like, oh, these people are getting up because they're coming backstage and like we're gonna meet up afterwards. But the media is gonna think that they're leaving, but they're not leaving. Like it was crazy. Like it was real time. Like
That's
him
wild.
hoping. Yeah, it was really bad.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think that not many people are gonna see this. Are gonna see that moment because we don't really
Yeah.
see that much Trump anymore on mainstream news coverage unless you're like you don't really see it unless you're a political junkie like us.
Mhm.
I don't know. I think we've made up our minds.
Right. I'm not.
Yeah,
I haven't been undecided.
despite a strong showing from Vance, I think I'm leaning towards the Kamala Walls ticket
Right.
at
I
this
mean, that's the
point.
thing too. Is that like I knew who I was voting for 8 years ago. Like I was like, my first election was in 2016. I was like, I'm never voting for a Republican for as long as I live, and that's like they're like Abraham Lincoln could leap from the grave alongside Teddy Roosevelt, and they could apologize for all the bad shit they did to Native people, and declare themselves socialists. And I'd think about it. And that still wouldn't be
I don't
enough to
know.
win me over right away.
I think that before that they would be like, wait, you guys have black people in your schools?
Right. That's the other thing. Like, who taught this savage how to read? That is a bad move. Now I should post on Twitter and get into arguments with the cat.
You made one of them president?
You made one of them? Oh my god. But like there just isn't any way that I'm ever gonna vote Republican. Ever. Like as long as I live. Like even even if I like personally knew a guy who was running as a Republican, I'd be like, why do I know you? Leave me alone. It's not gonna happen. It's never gonna happen. I'm at the point where, and I don't mean this to be mean, but I am being a little mean. If you are still undecided at this point, you better have a pretty damn good reason, or else I'm going to write you off as being really poorly informed.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
I don't super understand. I don't super understand how you could be undecided. Like, I don't like Harris. I don't like Harris. I kind of like Walls, but it's against Trump. Like, he's an idiot, and he's gonna destroy the country. He's like, I just don't get it. If you're informed in the least and you care about your freedom, how, unless you're like, I get it if you're a rich white, like if you're a white man billionaire, I get it. I get why you're voting for Trump. It's going to benefit you. Anybody else, that's not going to benefit you at all. Harris is not going to give me exactly what I want, but I'm not going to get exactly what I want from anybody. Like, I'm firm that I'm voting Harris because the other option is Trump.
Right. I'm going to be lucky to be alive.
Well, I will say,
a Trump term. Like I feel like that's legitimately where we're at.
I will say the one reason I'll say is valid for being undecided at this point is people rightfully horrified about the Biden administration's dealings with Israel and Gaza and now Lebanon and Iran, because as much as Trump is going to be worse, undoubtedly, I don't have it in me to tell someone from the Middle East or has family in the Middle East that they have to vote for Kamala Harris. I mean, I just don't. I couldn't look at them and be like, she's earned your vote. So I'd love to see a break from policy.
I completely agree with you. I think, but I still come back to, I'm not going to tell anybody Harris is the best option for you, but comparatively, it's the only other option. I don't know. But I'm saying this as
it's true.
A white woman. I can't speak from the perspective of somebody else. So there may be a ton of reasons that I can't understand.
Yeah,
But
well, that's
as
why.
who I am, I
That's
don't
why I
understand.
can't. Yeah, I mean that's why I can't bring myself to go down that hole.
But and here's the thing, because this is gonna be super unpopular, but I feel like I can, like, I will say that, like, like, hey, because it's not under a Trump presidency. I don't know, like, all right, let's look at the COVID response, right? During the Trump administration. Do you know what happened when the Navajo Nation asked for support from the US federal government during COVID?
Tell us.
They sent them body bags. Like, so I'm like genuinely worried, especially since Trump and a lot of Republicans have been openly talking about, saying very racist things about Native Americans. There's been a big uptick in anti-Indigenous rhetoric from the Republican Party in the last few months. Also, the seizing of federal lands. Tribal lands are
Yeah,
sometimes considered federal lands as well. So, like, there is a
yeah.
vested
Came up in the
interest
debate.
in me. Right. There is a vested interest in me as a member of the indigenous, the American indigenous community to not to make sure to do everything in my power to make sure that Trump is not elected. Because there are, like, I get it, like, it's hard to vote for somebody who, like, currently Biden is supporting the genocide going on in Gaza. But to know that, like, when you have to do the math of, like, hey, you know, like, there's a chance that genocide might stop under Harris, that Harris breaks with Biden. There's a chance of that happening, versus there's a chance of a second genocide being picked up again,
Yeah.
just cuz. Not for, like, any good reason either.
Although I
And
will
so,
say
yeah,
that it's a really horrifying state of affairs that our options are one genocide versus 1 to 2 genocides.
Yeah.
Like
yeah, yeah.
that's our ticket right now.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible place to be in. But, at some point, you have to recognize that, there, there aren't a whole lot of options right now. The system is
Yeah,
very much designed to run that way. We can hope for the best, but, part of hoping for the best is pushing for the best. And
Yeah.
that's something that's going to take time and be gradual. And my God, I wish it was so easy as we could snap our fingers and we could solve all the world's problems right now. But as long as, rich, evil white men run the world, that will never be the case. And so the next best thing is to do things as much as possible wherever we can. And to me,
Yeah.
the closest we're going to get to righting that wrong is going to be under a potential Harris administration that breaks with Biden, because Donald Trump would turn the region into glass if he was presented that as an option.
Yeah. Speaking of kind of Trump tearing things down, I kind of want to switch this a little bit just to some of the comments Trump made recently. How he called for one real rough, nasty, and violent day of police retaliation in order to eradicate crime immediately. And then he goes on to say one rough hour, and I mean real rough. The word will get out and it will end immediately, It will end immediately. I think that's just terrifying.
Right.
yeah.
Right.
The word that a lot of people are using to describe that is the purge.
Mm-hmm.
The word that came to mind for me was crystal knocked.
Right. And the more that I think about that, the scarier it becomes too, because, like, yeah, here's a fun fact. You know what? And this is not a fun fact. Whenever I say it's a fun fact, it's not. Do you know which racial group is most likely to be shot and killed by police?
Native Americans.
That's right. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bingo. And guess what? Where we went to school in Potsdam, New York, which is, about half an hour away from Akwesasne, which sits right on the border of the US and Canada. And crime does happen there, and it's usually almost always blamed on the natives.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard to, like, sort of see if you are, a white border patrol officer who's living, around the reservation working on the border. How do I know you're not going to take that as a means that you can just start going to town on, suspected smugglers because they have an accent?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
That's, again,
Yeah,
which only further reinforces my point of this guy cannot be president of the United States.
Yeah, and so what really frustrated me about this debate is kind of how civil it was. Not
Mm-hmm.
just because I want it to be more interesting, but because I mean we're running against fascists here.
Right.
That's what
Yeah.
this is. My ears went up to when JD Vance mentioned the federal lands.
Mm-hmm.
My first thought was also Native American reservation, and they were kind of buddy buddy up there, Walls and JD. They started off with a handshake. They agreed multiple times on things. They said that they believe the other one is working, that wants to fix the issues. I don't
Mm-hmm.
believe that. I think that's true at all.
Right.
I
And that
agree.
didn't come through whatsoever to me. And so then, when we get to the end of the debate, and we can get to some of the other answers that I thought Walls better on. But, they talked about January 6th, and the things that Democrats have been saying for the last 4 years is that Donald Trump is the single greatest threat to democracy that the U.S. has ever had. I
Mm-hmm.
believe that's true, and you're running against his running mate right now.
Yeah.
This isn't a guy that you can respectfully disagree with on the issues. This is a guy who could fundamentally transform the country as we know it
Mm-hmm.
for the worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that just doesn't come across. So I hate to see JD Vance's approval rating going up
Mm-hmm.
because I think that's a win for him. I think it's a step towards normalizing this kind of politics. I mean, I think that he pretty successfully packaged this genocidal language in what looked like this polished veneer.
Yeah.
I gotta agree with
something that I sent to our group chat last night while we were all watching this is that the problem with fascists isn't that they're impolite. The problem is that they're fascist.
Right.
And when they get that edge of being, welcomed into a civil discussion, then they've won.
No, I agree with you because we know exactly that's what happens. But I'm going to tell you this right now, and this comes from my own personal experience as a person of color. Do you have any idea how much I got tone policed while talking up in Potsdam? Talking
How many
passionately
times you got what?
Tone policed. People don't like it when politics is spoken with any passion. They don't. They like to think, they like to stick their heads in the sand and believe that, these are people who can respectfully disagree. But, and unfortunately, those are the people who are undecided right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's old white people in, places like Michigan and Pennsylvania who are like, I don't like it when people yell at each other about politics because back in my day, I didn't have to deal with anybody who fundamentally disagreed with me on anything. And so therefore I assume that's how politics is supposed to go. Right?
I think there are certain things that you can just generally disagree with and be like, okay, you have a different opinion, but that doesn't count with fascism.
Right.
That's not an acceptable thing to be okay with. That's a no for me. No.
Exactly.
I'm not going to have a discussion where you're supporting fascism. I'm just not. It's not an acceptable viewpoint in my mind.
Right, exactly. And believe me, I agree with that. I agree with that sentiment 100%. But I also know how people are, and people are the worst sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And people do not like hearing certain language, they don't like hearing certain things, and as long as we are catering to these people, and we will, as long as we have an electoral college, let's be honest, we're always going to be we're always going to be catering to these people who like their, politics to be all sunshine and rainbows and differences of opinion as opposed to fascism and resistance to fascism. That's the vibe we're always going to get. Unfortunately,
I
feel
agree
that
you can't. I agree that you can't call JD Vance a fascist in the debate in this current climate. But people know that Trump is a radical. Republicans know that Trump is a radical. The people outside his base, they don't like January 6th. And I think that they're receptive to that messaging that, these guys aren't normal, that they want to make radical changes that are going to restrict people's liberties.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I think there's room for passion for that. As much as, Donald Trump in 2016 spoke about politics in a way that nobody else had ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
And that did energize people. And he has this unwavering base ever since he stepped into the limelight. Barack Obama, I think, was an incredibly passionate speaker.
Mm-hmm.
I think
I miss the way Barack
I think
Obama
there's
spoke.
yeah. I think there's room for it. So like, yeah, I don't think that you can call JD Vance a fascist, but you can outline that this ticket is a threat to democracy
Oh yeah,
and that
absolutely. And I
they're
would say, like,
outside the bounds of what's normal.
if I was up on that stage, I would have called him a fascist, and I would have been brutal to him. Like, I can tell you 100% that that's what I would have done. But I understand why that's also bad politics.
Yeah.
Like, I understand
Yeah.
that that's not going to work very well for what I'm trying to do, because the American public
Right. But
are some of
there's
the dumbest people alive, and I don't mean that in, like, I don't mean that to be mean. I mean that just in the sense that, well, it's true, but also,
We cut
it's
funding for education. We don't want an educated public.
exactly, this has all been a very deliberate
Yeah.
conservative action plan going back to, Nixon. This is the result of almost a century of careful planning by some of the
Mm-hmm.
worst people to walk the face of the earth.
Absolutely.
Like, that's where we're at right now.
So I'd like to hear.
and that doesn't come across in this debate at all.
I'd like to hear what you guys think. Waltz did well in the debate.
Yeah.
I thought his answers around the abortion question were phenomenal.
I agree.
Yeah.
I really liked that.
I really liked how, again, he's the type of guy that, he's the cool uncle at the family reunion you talk politics with and then don't see for another 5 years. And I think that he does that very well, and I feel like while I felt that his performance in the debate was definitely worse than Vance's, I definitely came out liking him a bit more, because you can see, like, the passion is there. It's just very restrained. And I think that I do wonder if maybe he prepared too much for this, because there were instances where he was answering questions and he was clearly trying to get out as many of the talking points as he clearly had gone over. I'm going to blame Pete Buttigieg for that, since that was his debate prep partner, and because I think it's funny. But, he also had a couple of gaffes that night that were kind of like, like, if it was Joe Biden, that would have been disastrous. But because it was him, it was kind of funny, where he said that he was like, he made friends with school shooters. I was like, yeah, like, I definitely have had some friends who I probably would have been worried about, and if you had told me, I probably would have been like, yeah, that checks. But it's I felt overall he definitely played the part I feel like he needed to, with the criticism that Slade and you have both shared about him not being, condemning the fascist JD Vance thoroughly enough. Because I agree, it wasn't as good enough, but I certainly understand why it wasn't as strong as it needed to be.
Yeah, I don't necessarily expect anyone from the Democratic Party to be as like, kind of, not necessarily aggressive, but a little aggressive about the fact that they are fascists and that this is not an acceptable way to run a country, and that we need to stop them, and that's important.
Yeah, I mean, I thought
expect
Kamala Harris did a good job in the debate against Trump. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
That's pretty much all I wanted to say. there's a way of laying this out for people.
Right. And I think consequently that's one of the reasons why that debate was always going to be more important than this one. Nobody gives a shit about the vice president debate. Most people couldn't tell you what the vice president does, if we're being honest.
I mean, they don't.
Right, they don't do anything. I mean, like, and JD Vance leaned into that that ignorance of the American public as to what the vice president does with his attacks against terrorists.
They have like one hard power, right?
Right.
They can cast the tie-breaking vote in the Senate.
Right. Right, exactly. And that's
it, right? Like,
that's
that's the only thing.
There's a couple of things that they can be, like, given and stuff, and of course they always
can be delegated tasks.
Right.
Dick Cheney was extremely powerful.
Right. That's the thing. An effective VP can make all the difference, but that doesn't mean they're going to be a great president. And thank God we never got a Dick Cheney presidency. Although it
I
is
mean, we might as
weird.
well with the Kamala Harris ticket.
Yeah.
He also got mentioned in the debate. We brought him up one more time.
I know. We have to
Hey,
keep bringing up the
got that.
ghoul.
We got that Dick Cheney endorsement.
So I'd love to talk about, unless there's anything else you guys want to talk about the debate, I'd love to shift over to universal free school meals.
All right. Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
would
well,
love to do that.
I'll just end this real quick by saying that I also thought that Tim Walz did a good job on all the healthcare questions. I think that's really his wheelhouse. He's talking about like the fundamentals of insurance and why we need to have like a broad risk pool.
Mhm.
He definitely knows stuff with like the Affordable Care Act. I thought all those questions were really good. It's one of the last questions of the night, which is disappointing, but I think it's definitely his wheelhouse. And I thought he did really well on all those questions.
Mm-hmm.
There are two points that I want to touch on before we shift gears, and that's basically that I think primarily this debate, JD Vance had one job, right, and that was to alleviate the concerns among the conservative.
I wanted to beat the weird allegations.
No, I don't even think it was that. I think he wanted to show like the hardcore fascist wing of the Republican Party that he can take their platform and make it appealing to people, or at least make it slimy enough to pass through. And I think that he succeeded in that. He was able to show that, because I don't know if there's a lot of people who honestly believe that Donald Trump is going to survive another 4 years of the presidency. Not because of any political violence, but just simply because of his age and his physical shape, which we've seen deteriorate over the last few weeks, especially. I don't think if Donald Trump gets elected and gets inaugurated in January that he's going to make it to the next presidential election. He we only live so long, and there are a number of factors that go into it. I don't think Joe Biden was going to survive until 2028. So it's
I think JD Vance has kind of secured himself a spot in American politics for a while.
That's right. This is not the last we've heard of JD Vance, and it won't be.
I mean, he's going to be the 2028 nominee, probably one way or the other,
right,
whether Donald Trump wins or not.
And that is, oh my God, please, I hope he loses.
I mean, I think we saw his pitch pretty much.
Yeah,
for
it's
like how he would do politics.
Yeah, I think he did a lot of that to also to assuage the fears of the fascist elite of the Republican Party who wants JD Vance but weren't a fan of his performance up until this point. And I think that JD Vance is a very dangerous individual, and I think that this is not the last we'll hear from him if they do lose. And in my God, he's going to be a nightmare in the next several years. And then the last point that I want to say is that the closing remarks where Walz really went after Vance over January 6th is the rebuke moment we were waiting for. We wish it happened more often. We wish it happened earlier. But it was I think it showed that the strategy there was to use restraints and to not make it, not make it a boy cried wolf type scenario, because people messaging is always
but the wolf came. I mean, January 6th.
The wolf is right there, right? And I feel like, but the problem is that most people don't believe that the wolf was there to begin with. And that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with American people.
60% of the public thinks that January 6th, or thinks that Biden legitimately won the election.
Right. And those people are most of them already voting for Harris. Right.
But I mean, I think that's pretty cleanly the 40% Trump base that he has.
Right.
Which is not enough to win the presidency.
Well, unless you get real funky with the Electoral College, which is the problem, which is, again, a reminder that why is this still a thing? The Electoral College is the worst thing to happen to this country. And that's quite the list that it's contending with. But that's going to be my point, is that attack did come, and it was there, and they got a really great moment out of that. It was one of my three favorite moments in the debate, where he tried to force JD Vance to capitulate there, and he refused, and he looked like an idiot. and he looks like a
Yeah.
fascist. My other two favorite highlights were JD Vance crying about fact checking. That
Yes, that was great.
that was pretty solid. And then of course JD Vance's mic getting turned off.
Mhm.
Those were the highlights for me, and I think that's what people are going to remember because I think those are going to be the moments that are going to be in the ads and
Mhm.
constantly replayed, and mocked on SNL and stuff like that. Those are the lasting moments of the debate. I think those are what people are going to take away from that, and I guess only time will really tell.
Yeah. One of my other I think one of the other parts that Wall's a little jab that I thought he did really well was it was right after the legal like the Vance saying like, oh, so you're gonna fact check me now. He described like the application to apply to be an illegal immigrant or to be a legal immigrant, and JD Vance is like describing how like Kamala Harris has this open border wand, which is the quote he used, and he's like going through this thing. And Tim Walz just like interjects and he's like, these laws have been on the books since 1990. So that was good. Yeah, I think Tim Walz overall is just like too nice of a guy to really go at Trump the way we wanted him to. And I think I think his strategy was probably like going in was probably to exercise restraint, like you guys have been
Mhm.
saying. And I think that they thought that JD Vance was going to be much more of an attack dog and be a lot
Right.
more aggressive. More
I
aggressive. He kind of built that up in the media.
I agree with that too. I feel like we fell for that one.
Yeah. Then he kind of juked people out. It was a good strategy, honestly. I think it worked. All right, let's talk about some cool stuff.
So let's talk a little bit about universal free school meals. So what is that? It provides free breakfast and lunch to all students in public and charter schools, regardless of their financial circumstances. This is so incredibly important. So people have talked about this for several years. Many politicians have said it's not possible to get done, we can't fund it. During the pandemic, it happened. It happened for, I think, a couple of years, 2020 to 2022, and they saw a lot of improvement. Students got better grades, specifically on math standardized exams, and students came to school more. They attended school more often and paid more attention. They got better grades. They did well. They were happier to be there. Just some background about food insecurity and kind of why this is so important. There are 13 plus million children who lived in households that experience food insecurity in 2023, according to the USDA. 1 in 6 households with children struggled to buy enough food for their families in 2021, and 63% of voters nationwide support legislation that would make free school meals permanently available to all students. So, after the funding from the pandemic ended, several states decided that they wanted to make it permanent. So states like California, Colorado, Maine, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, which was spearheaded by Tim Walz, New Mexico, and Vermont. And then there's a whole lot longer list of states that are planning to do this in the future. This is incredibly important. Hits home with me. I didn't qualify for free or reduced school lunches. It's actually pretty difficult to qualify for free or reduced school lunches. I believe free school lunches you have to make, I think,
I think it's under
four.
32,000.
Yeah, so it's a very low number, and it has to be, I think, a family of 4 to make that much. And then I believe reduced is in the 60,000. And if you make even a penny over that, you don't qualify.
That's right. I know because I did qualify for this as a child. I had for many years school lunch was free for me. And then my junior and senior year of high school, it went to just reduced. And so it went up to 25 cents, and for my last 2 years of high school I had lunch maybe about a dozen times because of that, because I couldn't afford the 25 cents. So like this is an issue that is also very near and dear to my heart because I
Mm-hmm.
remember exactly what that was like, and I remember, you know, going to school and falling asleep during class because I, hadn't eaten until or since the day before then at dinner time. And there were some nights where I remember, missing dinner, and that meant going more than a full day without food and still being expected to perform and do well. And look, I was always kind of a bad student. Like I'll give my teachers that. But, you know, that program, when I was getting it for free, was sometimes the only time that I knew guaranteed I'd have a meal.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, and
that's
that story is like there are countless children across the U.S. where that's the case.
right, right. Exactly. And I'm quite frankly, I'm going to take a really radical take here and say that no child should have to worry about food. Like,
Yeah.
Come
especially, I
on,
know, I know, I know, I know.
come
Call me a
on,
communist, call me
John.
a socialist, call me a whatever you like. But,
They should be working for that meal.
okay, all right. Look, all right.
They want to be in the mines.
Somebody's gunning to run for Congress here as a Republican. We got the next Elise Stefanik here, ladies and gentlemen. Um, is that
Oh
who your
God.
district is, or is that too
Yeah, it is.
far? Yeah,
No,
yeah.
that's
Look at
that's
that.
me. That's me.
I'm so sorry for you.
Yeah, it's bad.
But no, I mean, like, all right. Let me even make the argument. So schools take children, in loco parentis for however many hours out of the day, 5 days a week for 30 weeks out of the year, something like that. Um, the school's liable for so many different things. I feel like uh, it's the natural next step that they're also making sure that the children that are under their protection and under their care are fed.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the idea of a lunch debt, which is what happens when you can't pay for lunch and you have it anyway, is ridiculous.
It's disgusting.
It's
Yeah,
absolutely
well, some schools
disgusting.
not letting you graduate
Mm-hmm.
unless you paid off your lunch debt.
Right,
And
because that happened to me. They pulled me into the office at the end of the year. They were like, "You owe lunch debt. You need to pay this, or you won't graduate." And it was 25 cents. And I remember looking at the principal, and I was like, "Really? Like this meeting costs more than what I owe? Like just in terms of time that was wasted getting me down here, sitting me down, and pulling me from class." And telling me that I couldn't graduate because I owed 25 cents. Like, really? Give me an hour in the parking lot. I'll get you 25 cents. It's such a ridiculous concept. And the fact that anybody could be against that is mind
Mhm.
boggling to me.
And in
Yeah, and
addition to that,
so in so I just want to
with
real quick. So
with
in like
school debt,
now go ahead.
sorry, with school lunch debt, not only do they restrict you from graduation, they can restrict you from after school activities. And what a lot of people have said is the biggest part of that is the embarrassment and the stigma. So I've been in the cafeteria when people have had a lunch debt and they accrue a certain amount of lunch debt and they're not allowed to have the regular lunch. They get like a cheese sandwich. And the lunch lady says loudly, "You have this amount of debt. You cannot get lunch." And takes away their lunch, which can't be given to another student because it's already been put on the plate, it's already been touched. So it has to be thrown away. In some schools, I've seen they put stamps on students' hands that says this person owns a lunch debt, cannot get lunch until they pay their debt. It's just disgusting. Slade, go ahead.
I was gonna say my county actually provided free lunches when I got to high school. I've been trying to find when we were prepping for this, I was trying to find like what policy did this. I couldn't find what that was. Maybe it was just my school district. But the New York State lines for to qualify for free lunches um is $39,000 a year for a family of four. That's when that's like the cutoff for when um you get free lunches. Which is a ridiculously low number. That's poverty as far as I mean that's
Yeah,
so little
you're
money
not
to
able to
raise a family of four.
you're not able to afford anything at that point. It's
Yeah, and
ridiculous.
the full price and the benefits end like your past reduced lunches when you're making $55,000
Hmm.
for a family of four, which is still not like not enough money to live hardly anywhere in the state. And I
Yeah,
lived
and
in
it doesn't take into
one of the lowest cost of living counties in the whole state, and that's still not enough.
That's right.
Mhm.
The shithole known as St. Lawrence County.
Hey, hey, should I dox myself? Clinton
Okay,
County.
so you can dox yourself. That's always is it really doxing if it's yourself. Anyway, yeah, no, it's just it's why have we decided that it's okay to punish children for their parents not being able to afford, you know, to buy them school lunch in an economy that quite frankly punishes you for having children.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, case in point.
Case
And
in
even
point.
the waivers to get free lunch in a lot of districts, they're brightly colored, they're not on white paper, and you have to fill them out and bring it in. And a lot of parents take that as, I can't feed my child. And that's not a good feeling. If you make
Yeah,
it
I mean
universally
it's
free, you
humiliating.
don't have to fill those out.
Yeah, and it ends the stigma. I mean, there's also like plenty of stories of people, you know, I mean, the old like getting your lunch money taken is a little bit outdated at this point, and some and many parts of the for most of the country. But I mean, it's still real. Like if you're spending if you get to go to school with 50 cents to buy lunch and somebody takes it from you, I mean, it's humiliating. It's humiliating.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, stamps are another tactic that some schools use. They'll stamp the kids' hands that like qualify for free lunch, which just feels like branding to me.
Yeah. I was talking to my mom about this, and she said, I swear to God, if you came home with the stamp, I would kick the shit out of somebody.
Yeah, I mean, like, why are we
Yeah,
marking
and I
children with shame to, like, you know, again, it's like every aspect of a non-universal lunch program feels like it was designed by psychopaths. Like there's no way
Yeah,
around it.
the only way that schools have been able to get students who cannot afford to pay their lunch debt to pay it is shame. Is to take that money by shaming the child, shaming the family, making it public, making it embarrassing. Universal free meals completely eliminates that. Everyone gets free meals. The schools do not have any lunch debt. One of the ways that several states are funding this is by a slight tax increase. And I looked into this, and generally, for the individual person, the tax increase is 3 cents per year. Three
Man, I
cents per
would
year to feed all of the children.
you know what? I will give the state of New York 30 cents extra just to make sure that 10 kids
feed
don't go
10
through the
kids.
same thing I went through. I could feed 10 kids right now, right? Like there's loose change somewhere in this room that I'm sitting in that could feed, you know, a dozen families worth of children for the year.
Yeah,
Like I
that
would
is in
gladly
fact.
do that. I don't
Well, you know, John, if you do, it's a federal crime.
listen. I was
You're
born a
not allowed
federal
to pay
crime.
more than what
Okay,
you owe.
I was born of it. Yeah, I'll gladly fork over my. No, actually, if I give the government 30 extra cents, it's just gonna go to bombs in Israel. I know that.
Facts.
Yeah, I mean, I
Um,
think that the thing that we need in this country is a constant updating of our social safety nets as our economy and wealth continues to
yeah,
grow, which is how it was originally
absolutely.
supposed to be designed, right?
Right.
Like, um, in the FDR day, like the early propositions of like the implementation of like the 5-day work week was that this would move down to like a 4-day work week over time, and that we'd expand the social safety nets as the decades went on. That never happened.
We've only made it harder and more stigmatized.
Yeah, and the ways that you like actually, get our economy to benefit everybody is, as it grows, you provide for more people.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
right, and I think feeding children is a pretty good way. Is a pretty good way to start.
Yeah.
No, I don't know about that, Slade. That sounds like socialism. Sometimes I really hate the state of this country and how much the brain rot has set in for the conservative minded folks in our country.
Yeah.
Who
I don't understand why we wouldn't want to support, at a minimum, our children being fed.
Right. Well, have you considered the fact that
Right,
some of
in
these
schools
programs are
too.
going to help children of color? And that's probably what exactly.
I hadn't considered that.
You hadn't considered that? Yeah, see, no, Slade, you need to think like a racist a bit more often. Let me tell you, it helps.
Right, disproportionately, even. It would help them.
And I wonder why that is. I wonder why it is that kids of color have a hard time, paying for their school lunches. I wonder if that's, maybe there's a systemic reason for that. Maybe there's something about how our country was designed, about how our economy's structured. I don't know. I don't know.
It sounds like critical race theory to me.
Can't do that no
Yeah,
more.
so universal school lunches is one of several policies that Tim Walz has passed in the past couple of years that made him very popular, and like also got him the VP pick ostensibly.
Yeah.
And I think that this proves that like people will respond to this. Like people like these programs. Could you imagine rolling back what they have in place in Minnesota now? Like they wouldn't stand for it.
Yeah. Yeah,
People
and
can't run on not doing this stuff. I mean, they do, but like
we can
unsuccessfully.
see a lot of states are headed in this direction. A lot of states have preemptive laws that they're working on to get either universal free lunch or similar programs that will help either raise the amount you have to make to qualify, make it easier. Another thing universal free meals do are reduce the administrative work. You don't have to go through all these forms. You don't have to submit all these forms to the administration if everyone qualifies.
Wow, it's almost as if it's like less work to do the right thing. And how
Absolutely.
often are you going to get that? Like how often are you going to get into a position where it's like here's a thing that is like universally proven to be a direct benefit not just towards the kids, but like towards society in general, which is sort of the whole, operating principle behind welfare programs, which is that eventually it saves the state money in the long run.
Yeah,
and how I just and then it's it's more efficient. Like imagine not having to track, like that's a whole thing that you don't need to do.
Yeah.
And it's
yeah, and this is something that Tim Walz touched on in the debate. I wish that he had gone a little more into this about how like investing in people pays out in the long run. When you have a long vision for the country, like these things are good. I think it's important to note that like this idea of free school lunches is a pretty recent one, at least like in a permanent sense. It wasn't until like post-COVID that states actually started passing free permanent lunches. 6 states have now done that.
Yeah.
Those states are California, Maine, Colorado, Minnesota, New Mexico, and Vermont.
Vermont is the least surprising one. I'm going to be honest with you. That's
surprised it
the
hadn't
one
been
you
done
tell
earlier.
me it did something that was a net positive, right?
It's actually, I'm going to fact check you. Sorry. It's actually 8 states. As of this April. California, Colorado, Maine, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, New Mexico, Vermont.
Listen, I was told that the rules, there wouldn't be any fact checking.
I'm sorry, my bad.
I reject that.
So I think this is a good point to close it up. Do we have our final question?
Our fun question? I think that was
our fun
Slade's
question
this time.
Yeah, I proposed the fun question for today, and that is, what is your most prized video game achievement? We're all pulling up the Steam library.
That's right. That's right.
I'll go first because mine is not going to be as good as y'all's. Mine is from Bloons TD6, and it's winning 100 games using a skin of a hero.
Still,
That's
I mean, whatever. An achievement's an achievement, right? All right, Slade, let's hear yours.
All right, so I loaded up 2. They're my lowest percentage achievements in Baldur's Gate 3. I got kill 2 birds with 1 gnome, use 1 enemy as an improvised weapon against another. That's how you clear Act 1, by the way. For anybody listening, get a berserker, give them Tavern Brawler, and start throwing goblins into each other. It works like a charm. It's not just funny, it's effective. It's efficient. The goblins make great weapons. And my other one is Mind Blown, Romance the Emperor. Who I don't know, I'm hoping that triggers something in some people listening. For those that don't, I banged a tentacle monster in Baldur's Gate 3.
Lord.
Which is classic Slade, as somebody who's been good friends with Slade for a while. That's right. That is the dream. So I guess that
only
just
like
leaves
7% of people had that achievement when I got it.
And I got you one beat. I got one that has well, actually on the site that I'm tracking this, it says 0% because it's like less than 1,000 people. It's an achievement called Got 'em for Star Wars Squadrons, where you disable another starfighter using hand weapons and then destroy that in like a dogfight. I was a menace in that game. Let me tell you, I was the best starfighter pilot in the galaxy. I swear to God, that was what my Xbox friends used to call me whenever we would play. It was a whole thing. I really lived up to that reputation in that game, and because of that, it became so hard to find games because people would see me and they would leave. Because there were only so many people that played that game after a certain point, and they would see my name and they would see me in my little X-Wing and they would be like, nope, I'm out. And I'd be like, you know what? Honestly, can't blame you.
I love those like niche games that like not many people play. So when you find someone, it's like it's a real one. I remember when I was in high school, I used to play Doritos Crash Course with my friends very late at night. And there would be like 100 people in the world playing that game when we booted that thing up. And we'd only play online. And so when you found somebody, it was like we'd wait, we were waiting like 7 minutes a game. And then you found someone and you stuck with that person.
We should get together and play something, all of us, at some point.
Yes.
Have like a big, we can stream it, have a big biased media plays, and then the dumbest game. Leave suggestions for what you'd like to see when we do get around to that. Maybe we'll do something really fun. Maybe we'll do something really bizarre. There's a lot of weird shit on Steam these days. I remember when they started letting porn games on, that's when I knew it was like, I'm gonna stick to my Xbox. That's the weirdest thing. I don't need to know how much hentai my buddy Trevor likes to enjoy. I really don't.
Well,
we have to play a game of Civilization. That's what we gotta do. A Civ game.
We've had a long time goal of playing a Civ game.
A long time goal. All right, but yes, as Emma's was doing the outro, I'll let you continue doing that.
Thank you guys for listening. We had a great time. We hope you had a great time, and I hope you guys will join us again.
And we'll see you next week.
See you next week.